So school's out for the year. We are done with the 2022 Formula 1 season. And for some people, that sentence is followed by thank After the barnstorming we had last year, we were brought right back down to earth with a championship campaign that was so dominant that by the midway point, the whole thing was kind of already over. In other words, a typical season of Formula 1. We were kind of spoiled last year, but let us not dwell in the past, we're in the here and now. We're here to grade drivers, but before that even, I wanted to shout a kind of Driver of the Year award for the year 2022. This isn't exclusively Formula 1 based, this is for drivers all around the world in virtually any category, any drivers that stood out a bunch. Like, for example, Dorian Penn, who just excelled in whatever she drove this year. Ferrari Challenge champion, first in class in the 24 Hour of Spa, and a multitude of fantastic performances. She has put herself on the map this year, and rightly so. Shane van Gisbergen has always been on said map, but the Spud Farmer is there for a reason. He has been utterly dominant this year in a championship that, as the great Davide Valsecchi would say,
is not so easy.
He won the Supercars Championship, won the Bathurst 1000, and got third in his WRC2 debut. Even with next year's mandate of chopping off one of his legs in order to draw the field closer, odds are this bloke still can't be beaten. Felipe Drugovich too has a good claim at Driver of the Year with his dominant Formula 2 run. No one really gave him a chance heading into this year, but he still did it. He shut all of us up. But in my opinion, he wasn't even the most impressive driver in the Formula 1 feeder series this year. That prize would 100% go to the Italian sensation, Kimi Antonelli. I don't want to curse this kid because for f***'s sake, we are in dire need of an Italian Formula 1 driver that's, you know, successful, but to compete in 44 races this year and win 25 of them, including taking the Italian Formula 4 title, the German Formula 4 title, and winning gold for Italy in the FIA Motorsport Games while driving with a broken wrist. Let me believe in this kid. Alright? He was fantastic and a genuine prodigy in amongst a raft of other prodigies. But really, when you factor in everything, there really is only one correct option for Driver of the Year. He just won everything, and despite his youth, displayed some awe-inspiring driving. Maybe not everyone's cup of tea, but who cares? This was the dude who thoroughly deserves Driver of the Year. You know who I'm talking about, of course. Kalle Rovanperä. Winning the World Championship the day after his 22nd birthday, Rovanperä became the youngest World Rally champion by a huge freaking margin. Despite a couple hiccups here and there, he looked at one with the car and took the title with 2 rounds to spare. He deserves all the respect in the world for what he accomplished, but you still want me to get back to the F1 stuff, eh? Alright, fair enough. Let's get into those driver ratings for Formula 1 drivers in 2022. So we're gonna go in ascending order by way of the drivers' standings. Those with one-off appearances, i.e. Nick de Vries and Nico Hulkenberg, won't get a proper rating as such, but since we're here, I suppose de Vries gets an A for his Monza efforts, and for his 2 appearances this year, I'll give Hulk a podium. Because when the hell else is he ever gonna get one? Okay, full-time drivers. We're gonna go by ascending order here. So we're starting off with a driver who will not be in Formula 1 next year. Now that the good news is out of the way, let's knuckle down into how Nicholas Latifi's season fared. Honestly, it was shithouse. The consequences of what happened at the end of last year is understandable, but we figured he may have gained a modicum of competency in a Formula 1 car with some halfway decent results last year, including an 8th place finish in Hungary, even if it was kind of a fluke. That, along with the new regulations, putting everyone on an even keeling, might have made us think, can he build upon that? Well, no, he didn't. He was way off the pace, and sure, he got those points in Suzuka. That said, it was a bit of a fluke as well. Looking at the year in totality, he was nowhere near his teammate. And that is your benchmark, no matter how crap your car is. So, to King Latifi, or Goat Tifi, whatever you want to call him, farewell. Don't Cry for Me Argentina, or however that song goes. He was hardly one of Williams' better drivers, but that doesn't mean to say they've been devoid of them lately. George Russell may have left for Mercedes this year, but in his place, Williams got Alex Albon. After being drowned in effluent at Red Bull in 2020, he had a chance to prove his worth, even if it wasn't a team that was well past its prime, and up against a teammate who didn't have a prime. Despite some iffy moments at the start of the year, by and large, Albon impressed this year, in a similar fashion to what George did before him, dragging that Williams into places where it should not have been, despite my prediction at the start of the year where I said it would be a top 10 car at every round. And being P19 overall does make this rating seem a little Yeah, I know, but you can only do as well as what your car allows you, and he did just fine. I'll echo those sentiments with Zhou Guanyu, albeit to a lesser extent. There's a growing trend in recent years where getting points in your debut race makes you the greatest rookie of all time. But with me, not so fast. I don't quite work that way. In this game, you have got to allow a rookie to breathe and grow in this category. It seems that neither of those things happened this year. Zhou was either harshly criticized or overblown slightly. Personally, in my opinion, he did good. Not a hell of a lot to add to that, really. He seldom made mistakes. His pace was pretty decent throughout the year, even if he was sometimes buried by his teammate. But then again, his teammate is a very good benchmark in terms of speed. Overall, this year was not bad, nor especially fantastic. It sort of falls somewhere in between. But next year will have to be the year for him. Even if I think he's a driver that tends to peak early in whatever category he gets himself into. He will need to impress next year, because Teo Porsche is arguably the better choice right now for that second seat at Sauber. And there is no guarantee that that second year will present anything amazing. I mean, take Yuki Tsunoda for example. And hear me out, I'm not slamming this guy. The AlphaTauri hasn't quite been there this year, and that's fine. That is understandable. What we can do is measure his performance against his teammate. And can we honestly say that either one of these drivers stood out particularly this year? He has made some mistakes, but that happens. That's racing. Slamming into your own teammate though, that's kind of a cardinal sin. The crashing is nowhere near as frequent as what it was last year. And most importantly, he has bridged the gap to his teammate pace-wise, and that is reason enough to give him more time in Formula 1. But seeing as how Dr. Helmut Marko seems to judge performance off of a Wikipedia page, just how much longer will young Yuki have to prove his worth? I'll tell you how much our next guy has. None. Zilch. Nada. Squat. Nothing. It is of course Mick Schumacher, who has been shafted for the only creature on this earth to have more lives than cats do. Shafted after 2 years in the game, and a plethora of crashes and bad results that validated the move by Gene Haas to get rid of him. Or at least some may have thought that. For a time that was true. Mickster only had one type of crash. A big one. Ones that wrote off cars and cost the team millions. The performances weren't particularly amazing until around about Austria time. At this point, the crashing stopped and the performances started to come in. His pace had picked up and he was driving well, and it was only then that Gene and Gunther had put a seat onto the driver market. The realities of why exactly Mick was ousted will probably be a mystery to us all for the foreseeable future, but with how Mick picked himself off the ground in the second half of that season, all those DECRA caps and missed podiums better be worth it. I haven't got a good segue for the next one, so let's just jump right into it. Lance Stroll. The running joke of predicting the maiden win for Sir Lancelot may have been unrealistic, but could it have been too much to ask for a little bit of consistency? He's had his moments for sure, but so has everyone else. And despite keeping on pace with his teammate some of the time, by and large, it was easy to see who was the better driver this year. And depending upon who you ask, it ain't gonna get any easier next year. You could say the same for Pierre Gasly, because you just know that a French driver joining another French driver at a French team powered by French power units is a recipe for mass French hysteria. In other words, if they don't end up taking each other out, their power units will do so before the race is done. For his last stint at AlphaTauri, however, Gasly was in relative no man's land. The car hadn't been all that great, and aside from a P5 finish in Baku, we didn't really see him dazzle like he did in years gone by. He struggled to adapt to the new car this year, which might sound like an excuse. And you know, when others around you are doing a better job at it, how much of a cop-out must we extend? Maybe this year's AlphaTauri did not help matters, but at the very least, he did better his teammate in the head-to-head and in the standings. And that's pretty much all you can ask of a dude. Rating too low? Well, maybe it was. And it probably would have been for our next driver, had he not shocked the whole damn world with his pole position at Interlagos, a moment that brought the motor racing world together. But this season doesn't hinge on just one qualifying session. You see, we think rationally on this channel. When we feel like it. After being drafted back into the team at the start of the year, he started off in phenomenal fashion and was proving to be the unlikely thorn in Sir Lewis Hamilton's side for the first few rounds. But after that, he never really matched these heights again. You could put that down to Haas not keeping up with development, but mistakes were creeping in as well. A season of ups and downs for him, but his return was well worth it. That year off was well worth it. Although he was lucky in some respects, because a gap year in Formula 1 isn't really a thing. I mean, we're still waiting for Mika Hakkinen to come back from sabbatical for f***'s sake. Mika lied to me. Why did you do that to me, Mika? But you need reputation on your side if you want to return. Ricciardo has that. Last year kind of ruined it, but this year completely ruined it. We saw this season that McLaren were not doing him any favors with funny strategic calls and an attitude from Monaco onwards that suggested that maybe he was already thrown out the door. The car didn't suit him, that much we know, and God knows exactly how much McLaren tried to help his cause. But playing devil's advocate here, how many excuses do we give a driver? For whatever reason, the results just weren't there. He drowned against his teammate. There is no getting around that. He'll look to return to the sport in a better place come 2024, which does sound overly optimistic, but considering some teams continue to persist with blokes such as Hulkenberg, maybe he will get a drive from a team principal who sees no value in junior series, in the same way that big corporations see no value in the environment. Good thing Sebastian Vettel is fighting that cause, although it's a great pity that he's left, one of the greatest drivers the sport has ever seen, held down by machinery and, occasionally, team incompetence ever since leaving the vicinity of Adrian Newey's pencil. In his last year, however, he had proven on more than enough occasions why he was so damn good. The start was a little shaky, I admit, but he did put on some awe-inspiring drive that helped him earn the lion's share of Aston Martin's points, and that's having competed in less rounds as well. Before this year is out, Seb will be getting a proper tribute video on this channel because he deserves that much. His legacy in the sport is such that he deserves that praise. And while this year wasn't totally amazing, there were times this year where he reminded all of us why he will always remain a legend of the sport. Now time to talk about the nudist. After years of playing wingman to Mr. 44, Valtteri Bottas entered Alfa Romeo with a clean slate. Two real objectives: beat his rookie teammate and help progress Sauber up the ladder. He did the first part in pretty convincing fashion. As for progressing Sauber, that's debatable. The team went up and down in form this year, which, may have been beyond his control. But in general, he put in some really good performances and carried on his qualifying form from his Mercedes days, which was always a strong suit with him. There were some less than convincing times for him, but otherwise, not too bad. Not too bad, however, wouldn't be the words I would use to describe Fernando Alonso, because the Lord of the Eyebrows this year, what can I say? I don't care about what the driver standings say, because the amount of times his efforts were curtailed due to things beyond his control was criminal. But he showed up every single goddamn time, and yeah, that's my rating. Doesn't mean to say that I'm just going to throw his teammate to the wolves though, because truth be told, the Alpine lineup this year was very good. Whenever they didn't harpoon each other off the road. It would be unfair to say that Esteban Ocon was left behind by his teammate this year, because he was not. There were plenty of times this year that he had proven his worth, where he did arguably perform better than Alonso did, but overall not quite as impressive as his teammate was, which might sound a tad unfair to some, but remember, it is a high bar, a very high bar, and ultimately he can't help the lemons being dished out to Fernando. Ocon certainly hit his weight this year, although he was not quite best of the rest. That title went to Lando Norris, which shouldn't really have been possible, given the McLaren was as temperamental as the tri-national troglodyte that currently runs Twitter. Alas, why they had to run the MCL 36 on the same drugs as he is. One podium does not sound great, but aside from the Ferraris, Red Bulls, and Mercedes, he was the only other driver on that grid with one. Some performances throughout the year weren't hugely brilliant, but a lot more besides would have had Ed Straw clutching at his tinkle. And honestly, Norris does deserve a lot of praise. Maybe not quite the knighthood that some people want, but close enough. So, the first of the Ferraris, Mr. Smooth Operator, Carlos Sainz Jr. The start of the year was rocky as hell for him. Way too many mistakes, which killed some of his results. Sometimes Ferrari got in their own way with him, but he personally needed a breakthrough in performance after Montreal. And that's what he got. A maiden pole position and a maiden race win at Silverstone. After some things happened, and thereafter, very slowly, he was beginning to find his mojo a little bit, right as the car started to fall down in performance. Whether those two are interlinked, I don't know, but despite 3 pole positions and a race win, it wasn't really that impressive when all was said and done, at least compared to his teammate. Now, when Mercedes revealed their no sidepod card this year, it evoked 2 reactions. The first was, oh my god, this is gonna blitz the competition and they're gonna Superman the field, while others were like, meh, that's cool. But have you actually, got the car to challenge for the title? Us cynical bastards ended up being proven right when the damn thing was bouncing up and down on the straights like a lowrider in Southern California. And one of those cars was indeed Sir Lewis Hamilton. We know the rest of the story about how the car was dreadful and blah 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 blah. But comparatively speaking, how was his season? Well, in summary, it was pretty good, but not great. Yeah, at the start of the season, the car was appalling, and they were trialing things with the setup, but in general, it just didn't seem that great a season from him. However, once they got that W13 to behave, somewhat. He was back to the Lewis we know and love. Some of those performances were just straight up insane, but some mistakes throughout the year, along with a slow start, doesn't quite make this the great rating that we would normally expect from this dude. It's kind of insane that he was beaten by his teammate this year, but that does come with the faintest whiff of an asterisk. There's no doubt that George Russell did put in some really good performances this year, and the consistency at the start was remarkable. Top 5 finishes in every single race for the first 9 rounds. But he did have a share of balls up this year. He had a knack for knocking into people on track, and once Sir Lewis got his head around the W13, you would be hard pressed to argue that George was the better driver at the time. That said, however, it would be unfair to knock his performances entirely this year, because my god, he kept Lewis honest quite a lot of the time. A maiden pole position, a maiden win, and ahead of Lewis Hamilton in the standings. However it came to be, that shit is rarer than, well, no, that's it. That's the benchmark. That's what we're talking about here. Overall, not quite as good as a whole as his teammate, but he wasn't far off, and it wasn't without its high points. In a way, I kind of echo the same comments when it comes to Checo Perez. For a lot of the year, he was nowhere near his teammate, which, you know, is kind of understandable given how fast the bloke is, and he was a good wingman to a dude who doesn't know how to wingman himself. His drives in Monaco and Singapore were superb. But when we know what the car is capable of, and you see the gulf between them, we can only praise Checo so much as I would like to. We would all love him to be champion of the world, but there is a hell of a lot of ground to cover. You're not going to win the world championship by winning only on street circuits. You need to win everywhere, and Charles Leclerc did that. For a while, there were some self-inflicted hardships, but for the large part, the downfall of Ferrari was thanks to the brilliant management and million IQ strategic calls from the pit wall. Prime Ferrari, I guess. With that rant over, Leclerc's season had some almighty ups and downs. He put on some brilliant performances throughout the year. He scored the most pole positions of any driver, and at the start, we really did believe that he could take the title this year. But then Ferrari happened. To be totally fair, it wasn't totally down to them. Leclerc did butcher some of his results as well, which in the end did hamper his rating. But given how the majority of the time he did deliver, I can't be too cruel to the dude, and I won't be. And I can't be cruel either to Max Verstappen. Say what you will about this modern day Chris Kringle, and about the budget cap, and about his teamwork, trying to beat this dude when he's got a car that can vie for the world championship, good luck. The vast majority of the year, he has looked indomitable, putting in some almighty performances. There were a couple of blemishes on his record that did lose him that little bit of extra rating, but for however much crap he may get from certain people, he is a deserved champion. One can only hope that his opponents can build a car that can challenge this guy, lest he Supermans the field again. You would need everything going for you to beat this guy, and this year proved it. So, how wrong was I this year? You all know the drill. Drop a comment below, subscribe to the channel if you're awesome, and always remember, keep it respectful, be wholesome, don't be a menace, and as always, I'll see you all later.